Hi, this is Tommy with Tommy's Piano Corner. Today, I'd like to share an idea I had that helped me when I was trying to work out how fast or slow I really wanted to play something when there's not really a metronome marking on the score, and in reality the metronome wouldn't really have helped me that much. So if you're sitting comfortably, let's begin. Let's face it, most classical music doesn't have a metronome marking on the score. And in fact, even if it did, it probably wouldn't really be that useful to us. Because, apart from the simpler pieces we all learn when we're first starting out, even shorter pieces of classical music tend to have different sections, they tend to have different moods within them, they tend to have repeats, they tend to have a lot of rubato, so the steady click, 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 click of a metronome really in these circumstances won't often help you that much. And then you'll find there are occasions when, if you've got a repeated section, what a lot of pianists will do to add interest to the music is that they'll take that repeat at a different tempo. Sometimes much faster or sometimes much slower. And of course, rubato is something that's present in a lot of classical music. The stolen time, so it's not a steady beat that's going on throughout the music. Anyway, I thought to demonstrate the technique that I've been using to help me with this problem, I'd use Rachmaninoff's 18th variation on a theme of Paganini. Those of you who follow my blog will know that I'm trying to record the orchestral part through my computer, so using software basically, not real violins, so that I'll be able to have a version that I can play along with. So this is something I've been studying for quite a while. So this is definitely one of my favourite pieces of music of all time. I remember as a teenager going to Manchester Central Library to borrow the orchestral score to it. And at the start of the 18th variation, somebody had written almost lovingly in pencil, "This is probably the most beautiful piece of music ever written." And I have to say, I sort of agree. However, what makes it a fascinating example to use to demonstrate this technique is that not only do you get great recordings by fabulous pianists playing this, you also have recordings of Rachmaninoff himself playing his own music, which gives you a totally different perspective on the way interpretations can differ from one pianist to another. So to remind you, it's a short piece of music, not even 4 minutes long. It's got a tiny introduction of a couple of bars that link it from the 17th to the 18th variation. You then have a main simple theme that's repeated 3 times. The piano plays it as a solo once. Then the orchestra joins for the second time. It builds to a climax as it repeats a 3rd time. During which the orchestra then drops out. The piano takes over again, and at the end there's a lovely, simple, understated ending. So then, what's the trick? Well, actually what we're going to do is we're going to record different versions of this, but we're not going to record it from end to end. We're actually going to split it down into sections first, and we're going to time those individual sections. The first question, I guess, is how do we decide which sections to use? Well, I think that really depends largely on the piece of music that you're going to study. But for this, basically, I used pretty much the sections I described before. I ignore the introduction because really that's just a link from one variation to another. But then I time each of the themes from the upbeat until the upbeat of when the theme comes back in again. And then I noticed when I was listening to it that there's an awful lot of differences in the way the third iteration of the theme is quite often approached, both in terms of the orchestra and the pianist. So I decided to split that into two parts so that I've got the part where the orchestra's playing and then the part from where the piano takes over as a solo again. And that, I find, splits it down quite nicely. I would advise always split it down into more parts, if anything, than you think you need, because it's easy to add two parts together later on, whereas if you find that you need to add more parts later, that means you actually got to re-listen to it and retime it, which can be a bit of a pain. So here's the table I came up with for this. Timing it, of course, is no real problem. We've all got a smartphone. Our smartphones these days come with a stopwatch generally as part of the whatever clock app that it's running. So that's what we're going to use. So quite simply, we take the stopwatch, we've decided where our sections are, so we start listening to the music, and as it starts, at the start of the first section, we press start. Then when we get to the start of the second section, rather than pressing stop, we press lap. And as you can see, that records the length of time the first section took. Then when we get to the start of the next section, again, we press lap. And simply we keep doing this until we get to the end of the piece, the last section, at which point we just click on end. And then there you have it. You've got all of the section timings just in the time it took you to listen to the music. All that remains to do is copy them down into something. I use a spreadsheet myself, but you could just use a notebook easily enough. So all we need to do now is choose a set of pianists to record. You know, depending on the music, you might choose to record some versions that you don't particularly like, or you might only choose to record versions that you do like. You know, for the purpose of doing this, I decided to record Rubinstein, I recorded Yuja Wang, I recorded Daniel Trifonov and Stephen Hoff, Rachmaninoff, of course, and that gave me, I thought, a really good cross-section. So after doing the recording, here are the results that I got. Okay, so let's just take a few minutes to see what this tells us. You can see that Rubinstein clearly plays it much slower than anybody else, overall at 3 minutes 56 seconds, whereas Yuja Wang, slightly faster than Rachmaninoff himself, comes in at 2 minutes 43, which is quite a lot faster for such a small piece of music. I'll declare my hand. I had a recording of Rubinstein playing this many years ago. I almost wore it out on an old cassette machine that I had. And I have to say that I just love the way he plays it. But that said, you know, you can see that it's clearly much slower than the way Rachmaninoff would have played it. I guess what I'm saying is I think some pianists have a tendency to rush this music through, and dare I even say it, probably Rachmaninoff himself, to my taste, takes this a little faster. It's too beautiful to go that fast. I mean, if you just take the first section, it's only 33 beats in total. So if you work it out, you'll see that Rubinstein is going at something like 43 beats a minute on average, whereas Yuja Wang is closer to 49, you know, which is a big difference all told. However, if you then look at how the variances grow as the piece moves forward, you can see that pretty much everybody tends to pick up the speed as they move towards the middle of the piece, towards the climax, and then slow it down again a little bit towards the end. So, and you might think this is what I'm going to suggest, you could now just use some simple mathematics. You know how many beats there are in a bar, you know how many bars there are in the sections that you've got. So just using that, you could work out a set of beats per minute values and use those. However, that's not what I'm going to suggest. And I think that's the real power of this technique, is that there's a better way of now working out what to do. So basically, what we're now going to do is we're going to record ourselves playing it. So when you come to do this, you don't have to have the piece perfect. You're not recording this to let anybody listen to. You just need to have a reasonably good grasp of it, wrong notes and all, where you can get through it more or less how you think you would want to play once you've managed to correct all of the errors and other little bits that are going on in the piece. And then once you're done, simply plug your results into the table, and you can start to compare what your results look like against the other interpretations that you've got. What you might actually then be quite surprised to find out is that you play it quite differently to your favorite interpretation. You might find you're playing it much too fast, you might find you're playing it much too slow. You can see in my case, I ended up playing it faster than I thought I was playing it. What I think makes this an interesting exercise is that by comparing it section by section, you actually can form a very good view of where you might be rushing through something a little bit, or where you might be overly labouring it, and it's more of an emotional almost connection to the music rather than a strict counting connection. After all, when you need to perform this, you won't be able to pull out a metronome to get your starting speed sorted. You're going to have to find that instinctive feel for how fast or how slow you want to play this piece of music. You know, I think what I discovered here is that, you know, I would have thought that I was playing the 18th variation very similarly, speed-wise at least. I'm not saying technique and beauty-wise as Rubinstein, but certainly speed-wise, I would have thought I would have been close to him. Yet in actual fact, I was far closer to the faster interpretations that, you know, are not my favourite ones. I'm not saying I don't like them, but they're not my preferred ones. And similarly, you know, when I've tried this on music that's meant to be played fast, sometimes I think I'm playing it probably too slowly because maybe my technique isn't good enough to play it as fast as it needs to be. But then when I time it, I actually find that I'm not really playing it slowly compared to many other interpretations. I'm playing it, you know, in the right kind of ballpark. So it just goes to show that by applying this technique, you get to see whether you've got something at a speed that you like when you listen to it. So, I hope you found that useful, and I hope it's something you'll be able to try in your own practice sessions. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and don't forget also the notification bell so that you get notified of any new videos released. What I'll do soon, I hope, is once I finish the orchestral recording of this, I'll try to do a recording for this channel of me playing my version of this beautiful piece of music against my own orchestral version. And with luck, I'll even find a way of sharing the file so that if people want to try and play along themselves, they'll be able to do so at home. Thanks for listening.